One of the most widely read authors in English literature is the famous Jane Austen. Her romantic novels have inspired many and have even been transformed into several motion pictures. Both in 1940 and 2005, her novel Pride and Prejudice hit the screen. Today I will be reviewing the most recent remake made in 2005 of this original novel. Let's take a look.
He's here.
Is he amiable?
Is he handsome? He's single.
Happily so.
Oh my goodness! Everybody behave naturally!
Mr. Collins, at your service.
In an era when marrying a rich man was the most a woman could hope for, Elizabeth Bennet was way ahead of her time.
I singled you out as the companion of my future life.
Sir, I cannot accept you. Don't worry, Mr. Collins. Tell her you insist upon them marrying. Oh, please. You will have this house. I can't marry him. And save your sisters from destitution.
You cannot make me.
From Jane Austen, the beloved author of Emma and Sense and Sensibility.
That is Mr. Darcy.
He looks miserable, poor soul.
Miserable he may be, but poor he most certainly is not.
Do you dance, Mr. Darcy?
Not if I can help it.
What on earth have you done to poor Mr. Darcy? I have no idea.
I do not have the talent of conversing easily with people I have never met before.
Perhaps you should practice.
May I have the next dance, Miss Elizabeth?
It would be most inconvenient since I've sworn to loathe him for all eternity. You may.
He's so rich.
By heavens, Lizzie, what a snob you are.
This fall, Focus Features presents the story of a modern woman
Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Do you think this union can be prevented by a young woman of inferior birth?
who discovered the one person she cannot stand is the one man she may not be able to resist.
Did you expect me to rejoice in the inferiority of your circumstances?
From the first moment I met you, your arrogance made me realize that you were the last man in the world I could ever marry.
Do you not think him a handsome man?
Yes, I dare say he is.
From the producers of Bridget Jones's Diary and Love Actually.
He's been a fool, but then so have I.
We are all fools in love.
Keira Knightley, Matthew McFadden, Brenda Blethyn, Donald Sutherland, and Judi Dench.
You have bewitched me, body and soul.
I thought she didn't like him. So did I. So did we all.
Pride and Prejudice.
This romantic tale is set in the 1800s and focuses on a young girl named Elizabeth Bennet. Elizabeth lives with her four sisters and mother and father. The Bennet family lives comfortably with their income, but is by no means rich. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet both earnestly look for suitable husbands for their girls. They hear news of a young, eligible, and wealthy bachelor named Charles Bingley, who moves into a nearby estate. Eager to see if he will be interested in one of their daughters, they bring their two oldest daughters, Jane and Elizabeth, to a ball that he is throwing. Jane and Charles seem to form a liking to each other, but Elizabeth forms a strong dislike for Charles's seemingly egotistical friend, Mr. Darcy. Elizabeth also encounters other men who have taken her interest, like Lieutenant Wickham and William Collins, a distant and wealthy cousin whom she has absolutely no interest in. But she keeps frequently bumping into Mr. Darcy, and she can hardly stand him, yet she can hardly keep her mind off of him. When a crisis with her sister Lydia strikes, her eyes are opened to Mr. Darcy's true nature. She realizes that the prejudice she has accused him of is really the pride she's had all along. The genre of Pride and Prejudice is romance and drama. It's rated PG for low-cut dresses, a kissing scene, drunk characters at a party, and the use of the A-word. It was released on September 16, 2005, and has a total running time of 2 hours and 9 minutes. The screenplay is by Deborah McGough, and it is directed by Joe Wright. Some other movies that he's directed are Pan, Atonement, and Hannah. The main characters of this film are Elizabeth Bennet, who's played by Keira Knightley, Mr. Darcy, who's played by Matthew McFadden, Jane Bennet, who's played by Rosamund Pike, Charles Bingley, who's played by Simon Woods, Mr. Bennet, who's played by Donald Sutherland, and Mrs. Bennet, who's played by Brenda Blethyn. Keira Knightley is also known for many other films, including The Imitation Game, the Pirates of the Caribbean series, but just the first three, and The Duchess. Matthew McFadden is also in many other films as well. He's in Anna Karenina, Death at a Funeral, and The Three Musketeers. Throughout this film, there are many special effects, and not special effects like you would think in an action or thriller movie, but more subtle things that maybe we don't notice but are really there. An example of this is near the end of the movie, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy are walking towards each other through the fields. At this time, the shot is taken at 4 a.m. just as the sun is rising. The shot catches the sun in between their faces and makes the perfect scene, but the lighting is also toyed with to make up for what they couldn't catch on camera. Another scene is when they're at real estates, and these real estates are actual real in England. And one is the Chatsworth House, which doubles as Mr. Darcy's house in the film. This and other old estates in the film are edited to look like they did during their era. So things like weeds that had grown were obviously edited out, and they enhanced the gold plating in the window frames and extended the courtyard. Another scene that I find really neat is when Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth are dancing. The scene portrays them in a room with everyone and then switches to where you can just see them. It's still the same time, but it's just showing them to show how focused they are on each other and no one else in the room. The actors in this movie did a phenomenal job at playing their parts. There were many scenes that I noticed this in, but one specifically is when Mr. Darcy confesses his love for Elizabeth. She does not feel the same way back, and she's angry at him for other reasons. Both characters are shown as very passionate and forward in what they're saying. And Keira Knightley, who plays Elizabeth Bennet, has always played strong-willed characters, and this scene really helps her portray this personality and emotion through Elizabeth. Another great scene is when Elizabeth refuses Mr. Collins. He plays a very awkward and odd character. He lacks emotion, and he's really portrayed here well because he's nervous and he rambles a lot in what he's saying, and he has like a failure just to look straight at her. Tom Hollander, who plays Mr. Collins, uses these traits in body language like facial expressions and movement especially to portray this very well. And after this, after she turns Mr. Collins down, Mrs. Bennet is infuriated. She bursts into tears, telling Mr. Bennet to force her to marry him. Brenda Blethyn, who plays Mrs. Bennet, does an amazing job of conveying this emotion. She cries obnoxiously and does a great job of conveying her character, which is caring, yet way too controlling and slightly annoying. Joe Wright, the director of Pride and Prejudice, did an amazing job of turning such an iconic book into the film it is today. In the movie, Elizabeth is portrayed as a bold and somewhat impatient character, whereas in the book she is presented in an intelligent, sweet manner. Her character in the movie, though, is still caring, but definitely very bold. I personally love Elizabeth's character in this movie. She's free-spirited and lively. Although she struggles with pride issues, that's part of the purpose of the story, and Joe Wright did a very good job of conveying this. He also did an amazing job of picking Keira Knightley because she's a perfect actress to play this part, because she's bold, and you can definitely tell that she has some pride. He also develops the story very well. He keeps Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship sort of mysterious. They dislike each other, but at the same time, they're very interested. He uses subtle things to portray this, like the scene where he helps her into the wagon. A scene that really shows Elizabeth's dislike for Mr. Darcy right off the bat is at the second dance. I'll recite some of the dialogue from this now. "May I have the next dance, Miss Elizabeth?" "You may." "Did I just agree to dance with Mr. Darcy? I dare say you will find him very amiable. It would be most inconvenient, since I have sworn to loathe him for all eternity."
May I have the next dance, Miss Elizabeth?
You may. Did I just agree to dance with Mr. Darcy?
I dare say you will find him very amiable, is he?
It would be most inconvenient, since I've sworn to loathe him for all eternity.
Overall, the film Pride and Prejudice is one of my favorites. It's a very sweet and romantic tale, and even though it's set in an old time period, it's very relatable to today. Elizabeth has many flaws and imperfections that she struggles with, and it just goes to show that you don't have to be perfect to fall in love. I would recommend this film to anyone, not just girls, but also guys, because it's very sweet and it has so many valuable life lessons.